Have you ever submitted a Pokemon card thinking it was a guaranteed PSA 10, only to get it back as a 9 and have no idea why? The difference between a 9 and a 10 can be hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, and most collectors don't realize the tiny details grading companies are actually looking for. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to pre-grade your card step by step so you can predict grades before submitting and dramatically increase your chances of hitting Gem Mint 10s. Now, before we jump into pre-grading, I want to do a very brief overview of the major grading companies in my book, just so you're aware of what the pros and cons are if you've never submitted before. And ultimately, after you pre-grade, you got to decide where you want to send your cards. So now, if you do already know a lot about the major grading companies, feel free to skip this bit. Starting off with the by and far market dominator, PSA, you can see the categories that I'm, rating everything by here. But PSA just increased the cost of their cheapest bulk tier to $24.99, which makes it the most expensive in the market. Now, for the pros, PSA by and far has the highest resale value in the market. Same for liquidity, highest in market. It's also the card show dominant in-person transaction. I hardly see any other grading company at shows. Now back to cons, there is no transparency with your PSA grades. Start of 2025, they upgraded their standards for a PSA 10. And you have to be within that 55-45 ratio for centering to get the 10 now. As for scandals, PSA is probably the worst in my book right now. They are now in the business of buying back cards to then resell them on their eBay store, which I personally believe is a huge conflict of interest. They were also accused of switching grades from a 9 to a 10 with specific cert IDs. If you want to learn more about it, Google Pikachu Zekrom tag team scandal, PSA or something. As for volume, PSA handles the highest volume by far. Along with that comes the longest turnaround times of any company. Moving on to not the biggest, but my next personal favorite, Tag. Now, for cost, their bulk tier is now $19 a card. Now, one major con, resale value, it's about 20 to 30% lower resale value than PSA comps. I sell tag slabs on my eBay store and they sell quickly on average. Now, as for grade transparency, Tag offers full transparency into why your card got the grade it got. There's a full dig report. If you want to see what the dig report looks like, I have other videos on my channel going through them, but full transparency, big pro from Tag. Now, along with transparency comes more grade strictness. But on the plus side, you can trust that your grade is as accurate as possible. Now, Tag is not immune from their share of scandals. They heavily rely on AI for their grading. There have been instances of incorrect grades being issued. If you want to learn more, Google Sylveon Gardevoir Tag Team Tag Grading. Last, Tag has the lowest volume by far, but the plus side of that is much faster turnaround time. So if you want your cards fast, go with Tag. Moving along to Beckett. Beckett has really competitive costs as well. $14.95 for their base tier. You can add subgrades for an extra $3 and there's no minimum. As far as resale value goes, the big chase, if you're not aware, is the Black Label Premium. It's the hardest grade to get by far. If you get that Black Label, you're looking at a 5 to 10 times cost multiplier from a PSA 10 value. Now, if you don't get that Black Label, on average, you're looking at 10 to 20% lower than PSA comps. So now for grade transparency, they do okay. With the subgrades, you can see why the grader rated each specific element of your card. Now, Beckett is by and far the strictest grading company in the market. On the other side, you can kind of trust that you're getting the most accurate grade as possible. For scandals, you can Google the one with their CEO, but the worst is that PSA is acquiring Beckett. Big thumbs down. Turnaround time on their base tier is 75 plus business days, so kind of long. Last, we'll wrap up with CGC. I've never submitted with them personally, but I'll try and do my best to cover them. Cost is really competitive as well. It's $15 a card on the bulk tier. Now for resale value, 20 to 40% lower than PSA. The reason for that is I think they are too loose on their grading standards. It's pretty well known that it's pretty easy to get a 10 with CGC, and I see far too many pristine 10s, so that impacts resale value. CGC used to offer subgrades, but as of a few years ago, no more. So no transparency on why you got the grade you got. Now for scandals, look up the alpha beta grading scandal. There was all these test cards that were graded that were fake. They've also had some issues handling their error card submissions. Look up Shiny Vert's video on this, but yeah, just look that one up. Their turnaround times are looking pretty good right now. It's about 40 business days for the bulk tier, so pretty solid. All right, time for grading. First thing we're going to tackle is centering. You have a couple different options here. I used to use this manual centering tool off of Amazon. I have grown to hate it. I find it very confusing. There's not a lot of instructions that come with it. Not a lot of great YouTube tutorials that I could find, but basically they give you this little rubric and you're supposed to be able to line it up on certain lines to get the ratio you want. And we need 55-45. I can never get it to work. So What I've started using instead is this card centering app. It's on iOS. I don't know of anyone's personally for Android, but I'm sure they're out there. Basically, how it works is you scan the card and there are automatic guides. You can see them flickering between green and yellow that tell you how to line up the card for an accurate picture. From there, these centering lines appear, and you then zoom in and manually adjust them to make sure they line up to the lines of the card as closely as possible. You can then see at the top of the card the measurements left to right and top to bottom. And remember, we need to be within 55/45 on both for front centering. You'll also see it'll like pop in the grade based on the grading company, but generally just do 55/45. There's also Z, X, and Y axis tilts if the photo is just slightly off or you're trying to upload your own photo. Be careful with those. Now, for this dugong I'm showing, this is within the 55/45 target, both directions. I would feel really confident sending this in just based on centering. I'd also recommend doing a back scan. Typically, back is a lot more generous, and as long as it doesn't look super egregiously off center, you're fine. But for back, you generally want to be within 60/40. Now, this Articuno card I'm going to give as an example, I already knew from just looking at it, it was too bottom heavy. A lot of centering can be done with your eyes, but I always think it's good to get in the habit of scanning all of these just so you can kind of start to train yourself of like what's obviously off center, what's obviously on center, and then what's in the middle and definitely requires measuring. So you can see after I adjusted the lines here, it is way too bottom heavy to send in, and it would for sure get a 9 just based on centering alone. Now, this last example I want to show is a card that's borderline, that gray area right in the middle. All right, now after I line it up, you can see it's pretty good left to right, but it's bottom heavy. And it's real close to that 45/55 line. I don't feel comfortable sending anything that's in this 44/56 ratio. For the lower number, the number that I would feel comfortable sending in is 47 and above. Now, the last piece of centering that is so hard to explain and teach, especially over a video like this, is the straightness of the line of the art in the card. I've also heard someone describe it as like the pitch of the card, like is the art of the card even or is it crooked? So this shuckle, right? From first glance, it's really hard to tell that it's off pitch. I wish I had like a translucent ruler to do this instead, but basically what I did is I zoomed way in on this top edge and I plugged in a sort of online picture measuring tool so you can kind of better see like how not straight this top line is. I don't know if this is in millimeters or what the measurement is, but you can see it's thicker on the top left corner than it is on the top right corner. So this impacts centering. To be honest, I don't really know how grading companies would measure centering based off of this. I don't know if it's just an automatic 9 because it looks janky, but anytime I see a card that's off pitch, I just don't mess with it and I don't send it in. So again, I think this is the hardest part to explain. Maybe it's obvious to other people, but yeah, if the art looks crooked, don't send it in. Now, if it's a card that you really like and you want to risk it for, like a really high value card, it might be worth testing your luck. With human grading companies like PSA, you might still get the 10. With companies like Tag, I wouldn't really recommend it from personal experience. Now, before we move on to corners, think of each of these steps as a sort of report card. If you can't check that box off on the report card and you want the 10, don't send it in. Now, moving on to corners. I'm going to show you what I used to use, and it's this magnifying glass. I think it's technically meant for coin collecting, but it's really nice because it has a little built-in light, and you can also kind of unfold it to look at the card from an overhead view. This is a pretty cheap item. I'll put the link in the comments. I think it was like 30 bucks. Now, in the last few months, I have upgraded to this beautiful device. This is a microscope. It was like 120 bucks. You definitely don't need this to get started, but I enjoy grading so much. I've submitted 300 plus cards. Like this investment is worth it to me. Another reason why I got this is you can record your entire grading session as you go along. I learned the hard way. If a grading company damages your card and you do not have photo or video evidence of its condition before you sent it in, you basically have no insurance claim. Now, again, you don't have to have this fancy device and a video that costs $120. You can take good pictures with your phone. Just make sure they're clear, good lighting, etc. Before we dive into this Articuno, I lay down this little sunglass cloth over the hard, somewhat surface of the microscope base just to be safe. Now, on front corners, you're just mostly looking for any kind of lifting. It does happen. And on back corners, you first want to look for whitening. If you see any form of whitening, that's pretty much automatically going to be a 9. I wouldn't bother sending it in. Now, the other thing you're looking out for on corners is nice, even, smooth corners. You almost want to try to draw a line from the middle of the corner And if it looks symmetrical on both sides, you're good to go. Versus this Articuno corner on the right, lined up to the perfectly smooth corner example on the left, you can kind of see that it's not quite even and round. It's a little janky, as I would say. So janky corners, depending on the severity, you could get away with a 10, but if it just looks really bad, I wouldn't send it in. Next, we're going to move on to edges. Now on pack fresh cards, the two things you're mostly looking for is any sort of foil chip or showing through from a really bad cut. The only example of this I know I have in my collection is this Pikachu. I still sent it in anyway, and it got a 9. The other thing you're looking out for is any sort of lifting. You can see on this Enzoroa, there's like a little speck here. You can actually almost see it better in person, but you can see the edge is basically lifted from a bad cut. Now, on older cards like this Umbreon Tag Team, you're also looking for whitening on the edges. Any form of whitening on the edges is the same as corners. It won't get a 10. Now, moving on to surface issues. There are a lot of different surface issues to cover. Let's start with back surface. Just like corners and whitening, the back surface of the card is also susceptible to whitening. So you can see this speck right here is a no-go. You're also looking for any debris, such as this little piece of crud right here, as well as scratches. Now, another notorious issue for back surface is print lines. Anytime you see this little divoted line on a pack fresh card, I would not send it in. One other thing to look out for is any indents in the card. I couldn't find a raw card with this, but I put up a tag slab that I submitted where I was sloppy and lazy and wasn't inspecting surface very closely. You can see pretty well this indent just from the microscope. I'll also throw up what it looks like on the dig report here. Yeah, not great. Any sort of dent damage like that is going to knock you down to like a 6 or a 7. The last thing I want to show, I swore I had a card that had this, but I can't find it now, is any sort of ink defects. These could come in the form of little red dots. I've also seen black dots. Basically, that anything looks out of place in terms of the color on the back is probably an ink defect and will automatically knock it down to a 9 or lower. Now, last is front surface. You're basically looking for all the same issues. On Pack Fresh Modern cards, I find a lot less issues on the front surface than I do the back. You can see on this Lucario, I basically just move along one section of the card at a time. I then, after I finish one section top to bottom, I then just pick a reference point, like I pick the energy marker. That tells me what section I haven't hit, and I just go back and forth till I'm done. I also do the same method on the back. Now, with vintage cards, they are a lot more susceptible to other issues like scratching and debris and just all sorts of other issues. So I don't grade a lot of vintage. I pretty much only grade modern. So do with that what you will. All right, that's all I got. This is my first ever long form YouTube video. So any likes, comments, and subscriptions are greatly appreciated. Hope you learned something. Hope this helps you on your next submission. Hopefully it saves you some money, not wasting grading fees on cards that'll get nines. I know how much that stings. For every product link I mention, I will drop the link in the description. And last, if you have any questions, feel free to send them. I'll try to respond to as many as I can. I'd also love feedback on any sort of future grading videos you'd like to see. I did a sort of brief grading company review at the beginning, but trust me, I could go on and on about the different grading companies. So I don't know, maybe something like that, or happy to show you how to submit through PSA, tag. Those are the two I'm probably the most familiar with. Until then, thanks for watching, y'all. Peace.